Good morning and welcome to Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday. Thank you for joining us. And this is our prayer with Friday. So let's get right into it. We're going to start the day off with our trending topics on X. And this one I picked out, this was actually a post by Jasmine Crockett. She posted it, I want to say yesterday, and I, responded to her post. But I want you guys to notice a couple of things. She's actually being herself. I was like, this is who you were when you started. And what I mean by that is she was a state representative before she was a House representative, right? So all of the bombastic behavior that was portrayed while she was in the House is not who she is. This is actually who she is. And it was just, I remember talking to my husband about it. I was like, I want her to just be herself. You can be yourself and still, hold the line, right? And when you need to have that aggression, right? And you need to, stand forward and stand your ground, 10 toes down. And we've all been there. We have to have a little bit of oomph. That was fine. But it was how she was used, in my opinion, by the Democratic Party. All that bombastic behavior that we saw, that wasn't who she is. This is actually who she is. So let's check out her post. Before I start the video, I just want to read the caption. It says, they paused oversight committee hearings the minute we started getting answers about the Epstein files. Okay. Now it's roundtables, no rules, no oaths, no subpoenas. You did the math because the moment accountability shows up, they shut it down. The survivors deserve better. And she's not wrong about this post, but let's talk about the survivors that had to survive. Everybody in Congress, that harassment, right? Those survivors that you didn't want to bring up, that they voted in a bipartisan fashion not to bring those people forward. That was my rebuttal. that was my recount, because I said, yeah. Also, there was a bipartisan vote not to give transparency of the members of the House with current harassment accusations and other crimes. Yes, there is Epstein, and we also have members of Congress that are allegedly worse than him. And the reason why they're worse is because they're perpetuating that same behavior. Okay. And this is what I was referring to. See, on March 4th, the U.S. House of Representatives voted 357 to 65 to table a resolution, 1100, that would force the public release of congressional sexual misconduct and harassment investigative records, resulting in a bipartisan effort to keep those files sealed. So before you start throwing stones regarding the Epstein files, which all of you are responsible for, by the way, you keep putting it on the DOJ. It's y'all's fault that these people have not been brought forward. It's Congress. It's the laws. So stop playing political football with us. We know better. We know better. And you were a part of the 357 to table this, by the way. But let's go on and check out her video. I mean, in all of this, she's not wrong. But we deserve answers from the sexual misconduct going on in Congress as well. Because, see, what you're fussing about with Epstein, y'all are doing the same thing within the halls of Congress and protecting literal pedophiles, allegedly, in Congress. So my whole thing is, if you're going to do it with Epstein, do it with yourselves, but you won't. But you won't. and that's the moral of the story, right? The moral of the story. Now, I wanted to get into just a quick update. I'm not going to read all of this, but I wanted to get into a quick update about Iran, because I know there has been newscast about an indefinite ceasefire. I don't think a ceasefire will be indefinite. It'd be great to get that. I don't think it's going to happen. That's just my opinion. So as of the 24th, the situation with Iran remains highly volatile amid an ongoing U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran, targets that began in late February, right? A fragile temporary ceasefire initially brokered in early April and extended by the U.S. until late April, right? And it's under significant strain. So there's naval tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. There's internal Iran divisions. There's broader conflict elements. And so I did ask a further question. I said, how will this affect OPEC? So the ongoing 2026 Iran conflict, particularly the repeated disruptions and particular closures in the Strait of Hormuz, right, has delivered one of the largest supply shocks in oil market history to OPEC and broader OPEC alliances. So there's massive output collapse. There's an export choke point, which we've all heard about, and infrastructure damage. So the symbolic quota increases as of April 5th. 8 key OPEC members, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iraq, UAE, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Algeria, and Oman, agreed to raise their output quotas by 206 barrels per day. This was modest and largely on paper or academic. It signals willingness to add supply once the strait opens and logistics normalize, but physical constraints, right? Block shipping, etc., prevent actual increases now. The hike is far smaller than the 7 to 15 million barrels per day distribution, right? This is in the hundreds of thousands. This is in the millions that's actually needed. So I wanted to go down, and it basically says OPEC's core goal remains market stability, but the conflict has exposed the limits of quota management when physical export infrastructure is the bottleneck. The situation remains fluid, tied closely to ceasefire talks, U.S. naval actions, and any further Iranian responses. Energy markets will continue reacting sharply to developments around the strait. And this just lets us know you cannot depend on government to come and save you. Look, I'm sorry. Our federal government, they've left the building. They left the building a long time ago. In states, you need to, along with your citizens, right, U.S. citizens, you need to get it together and figure out what you're going to do. Because at the end of the day, this falls on us. This falls on our shoulders. We need to stop looking at government like, you guys need to do right by us. They're not. They're not. They prove it time and time again that they're not. So stop sitting around whining about somebody coming to save you. They're not coming to save you. They never have. Okay? They left the building a long time ago, especially when we put the Federal Reserve in place. That's when our government left the building. So let's really be clear. No one's coming to save you. Figure it out. But today I really wanted to focus on fraud. So I started off with Jasmine, Representative Crockett. Okay. And that form of fraud from our government, trying to make us look at something while they're doing the exact same thing that they're accused that the other people are definitely guilty of and still doing right now. Okay. So I wanted to check out a few things that our federal government's trying to do. States are blocking some of this activity.
Battle over states' voter rolls is waging on. Now the American Civil Liberties Union, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and the Protect Democracy Project are out suing the Trump administration. They're asking a judge to bar the Department of Justice from accessing states' lists and deleting data it already obtained. Why are they going to such lengths? I'm pleased to bring in now Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice. Harmeet, great to have you back with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we have several groups here. What gives? What's on these voter rolls that they have to sue to try to prevent you from actually viewing them?
Well, first, let me talk about the success. Now, we've gone and asked all 50 states in the District of Columbia to give us their voter rolls. This is something that the Attorney General is entitled to under the Civil Rights Act of 1960, which is basically a transparency statute. And we're using those to try to help these states comply with their Help America Vote Act requirements to keep their voter rolls up to date. So far, at least a third of the states have complied with us voluntarily or reached settlements with us. And what we're running and finding in these voter rolls is that there are hundreds of thousands of dead people on the voter rolls, and there are quite a few suspected non-citizens on the voter rolls. And now we're digging in further to see did people actually vote and what have you. But that's alarming, and that is from the states who are cooperating with us. So imagine what the ACLU and these other groups are trying to hide vis-a-vis the states that are not cooperating with us. And what you're going to find in states like California, where in Los Angeles County, for example, in 2017, they already admitted to Judicial Watch that they had over 1 million people on the voter rolls out of 10 million who didn't belong there. So those are pretty staggering numbers when you think about how elections, like the 2020 election, for example, was really decided by tens of thousands of votes in half a dozen counties. So this is no joke, and it's really important that we get to the bottom of this. We have transparency, and voters are entitled to that.
They sure are. Well, I'm glad you're fighting for it. And I think the state that you're locking heads with that's important to call out is Michigan. So you have a letter that you sent to the county clerk, and you want the ballots from the November 2024 federal election in Wayne County. But you've got Governor Gretchen Whitmer refusing to hand over the data. She says that the DOJ is trying to take away the constitutional rights of people in Michigan to vote. It just seems that there is a reason here that is deeper than that. She's accusing the president of weaponizing the Justice Department. Talk to us about how Gretchen Whitmer has any legal authority to prevent you from seeing these records, Harmeet.
The idea that anybody like Gretchen Whitmer can talk with a straight face about weaponizing the Department of Justice after the revelations that we've seen out of this Department of Justice in recent weeks is really laughable. But that be that as it may, just looking at the logistics here, she sent this letter, the Attorney General of Michigan, a lot of bombast, posturing, and hand waving. But that's a distraction from the fact that she doesn't seem to actually have a client here. It's not clear that she's representing Wayne County. And we have a right to get these records from Wayne County. And our citations in our complaint, our letter complaining about why we need this, include at least three instances of improper voting conduct in that jurisdiction from the 2020 election, as well as alleged improprieties that I think I and other election lawyers identified very clearly in prior elections, including the 2020 election, where in Michigan, observers who are entitled to observe by law were barred from doing so. And so we intend to get these records, and we intend to get to the bottom of what's going on with these sloppy record keeping and inconsistent procedures in these states. Because what happens when you have these types of loosey-goosey procedures is people lose confidence in the outcome of elections, and then they don't vote. That's a bipartisan problem, and we need to put a stop to it.
Everybody remembers what happened. They were literally putting cardboard over the windows of where electors were sitting and tallying ballots. It was crazy if you watched it. And there were Republicans that were barred from going in. And they were completely unprepared. The judges were pretty much the Republican judges. They were of no help. They were just like, oh, well, they can just kick you out. No, they can't. It was disgusting what happened in Michigan. But here's my thing. States, when it comes to these voter rolls, this should be a no-brainer. You should be like, of course you can check our voter rolls. We have nothing to hide. What are you hiding? If you cannot properly go through an audit, what are you hiding? You should never be like, oh no, you can't look. What? Huh? What are you doing? What are you doing? This is, again, to the Attorney General that was speaking. People have lost confidence. This is why some young people don't want to vote. But this is why some young people are fighting to make sure that the voter rolls are clean so they can vote. California is a mess. And I think Michigan, too, they don't require ID. I'm not sure if Michigan doesn't require it, but I know California doesn't. There's no ID. You can just walk up and be like, yeah, let me vote. And they will. Yeah, that's happening. Okay. That's happening. So now let's move on to Washington State. This is, again, more fraud, and they are accountable to the federal government and completely refusing.
We're back, y'all. Thank you for watching today. Go ahead and hit that like button, my people. You know that it helps us out a ton. And, of course, it helps you because it helps us keep bringing you these stories every day. Now, y'all, we're talking today about the Washington income tax, y'all. Did you know Washington did not have an income tax until this year? Now they have passed an income tax on high earners. Those are people earning over $1 million per year, y'all. Now you might say, oh, so what? I don't earn no $1 million per year. That don't affect me. I don't even live in Washington. That doesn't affect me. But what does affect you, maybe, y'all, is the way that they went about it. See, a recent investigative report says that the lawmakers who passed this bill may have been up to some old dirty deeds, some tricks. They may have pulled off some tricks and some sleight of hand in order to take money from those millionaires. Now, again, you might say, well, who cares? Millionaires, they can afford to pay more. But I'm going to also show you where the Seattle, Washington mayor says she doesn't even care. She's not even investigating whether people are defrauding the state, y'all. She's not even going to investigate it. She's not even going to So take more money from people. People are going to steal it because that's what people do. And we won't even investigate it. Well, if they got it fair and square. They get it. They got it in. If they were smart enough to get it, let them keep it, right? So y'all, we're gonna take a look at both of these things today. I think it's wild. I think it's crazy that we would give the government, any more money while as we've seen recently, how much fraud, waste, abuse there is. But you be the judge, y'all. Watch the whole video and then you give me your opinion at the end. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
The so-called millionaire's tax is facing new questions after emails obtained by the Center Square suggest some lawmakers anticipated a legal challenge that could reach the state Supreme Court. The emails obtained through a public records request also show communication with the Attorney General's office during the bill's drafting. Fox 13's Alejandra Guzman spoke with a reporter who uncovered the emails and looks at how state officials are now responding.
In 1930, Washington voters were handed this pamphlet. The state was in a tax crisis. The 14th Amendment promised to shift the burden from farmers, but there was a catch. It defined income as property.
Every Supreme Court ever since has always ruled that.
It's been the law of the land since 1933. You can't tax income at a progressive rate. An August 2025 email from State Senator Jamie Peterson, obtained by the Center Square, shows him discussing expected legal challenges to the proposal. In the email, Peterson writes he would like to, quote, force the Washington Supreme Court to reconsider its case law that considers income to be
all of the money that they have been collecting in taxes. They already misadministered much of the money, a lot of the money that they've collected in taxes. That's why they need more. Don't think about it. It's not going to stop at millionaires. If you really think about it, they have income, right? They misadministered it because if they didn't, then they wouldn't need to raise taxes on anybody. They misadministered it. They want to get more money from the millionaires, right? Okay, well, who cares? They're millionaires. They can afford it. Yeah, okay, but what's going to happen when that's not enough, y'all?
Fox 13 reached out to the Attorney General's office, which says that role is routine, saying, quote, "We're required by law to represent the legislature. They get to ask us questions, and we respond. There's nothing unusual about any of that. It's what attorneys and the offices of attorneys generals do."
This was not meant to be a millionaire's tax. This was meant to overturn a century-old Supreme Court ruling.
The AG's office says providing legal advice to lawmakers is a standard part of its responsibilities. The emails also include discussion about an emergency clause, which can limit the ability to challenge a law through a referendum. Martinell argues the broader goal of the policy could extend beyond taxing high earners.
This tax right now technically it just applies to millionaires. If the bill does what it's intended, everyone in the state could be subject to paying an income tax.
Remember, what they're getting now is not enough for a reason. It's because of the way they administer it. So why should we think they're going to administer the millionaire tax money any better? They're coming for you people. Don't you understand? People just don't get this. So you might say, well, that's millionaires for now. You know, whatever. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not making $1 million a year, so it's not on me. Well, what about when they are just telling you to your face, hey, when people are stealing the money, defrauding the state of the money, we're not even going to go after them. We're not even going to go after them. Take a look at this.
Since influencers posted video outside Seattle area daycare centers alleging fraud, says she is working to protect the providers. What have you done in those regards?
Yeah, so we're working on that. So we have conversations going on with the departments. And yeah, it's just, I don't think it needs to be explained why it's problematic to have random people showing up to daycares. And I think the fear in the Somali community is real. The fear in immigrant communities are real. So we're taking that very seriously.
Wilson, who has been on the job for a week, says she's not convinced there is more to the story. On Tuesday, former longtime state auditor and Democrat Brian Sontag said he's seen enough to believe an audit of state funding of daycare centers is necessary, given allegations in Minnesota, Ohio, and Washington.
Well, there are questions, and I'm not saying they aren't answerable, but you don't know until you get the answers.
Along those lines, have you asked anyone to follow up on the fraud claims, either to the Department of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs or SPD?
No.
So there's, as far as you're concerned right now, there's no reason to suggest there's any sort of fraud?
This whole issue is not really about fraud, right? It's about dividing and conquering. It's about making an immigrant community.
No, it's about fraud. It's always been about fraud. And then everybody wants to fall back and say, oh, no, we're attacking the immigrants. No, we're not attacking anybody, because I don't care who it is. Immigrants, natural citizens, fraud is fraud. And you heard what you said, no. And see, what we don't see with the federal funds is that they have an office, basically, that the state hires people to deal with administering federal funds from their state, right? So that office doesn't necessarily work directly with the federal government. It's like the federal government says, okay, you guys have requested these funds. Here's the funds. And then the state goes, okay, we're the federal office here that's going to distribute these federal funds. So those people are hired by the state. Okay. Those are the people pushing the button. We'll just call those the button pushers that pay out the money. What's been happening in the state of Washington, they've just been pushing the button with no accountability. Absolutely none. Now, that video is from earlier this year, and the video goes on to just talk about how the Attorney General and just, the compliance and auditing at the state level, to make sure that these federal funds are administered properly. I want to say the past 4 years, there's been no reporting done. So you've been giving people money with no paperwork in return to prove that they're actually spending the money appropriately, or even where it's being spent. You have nothing. And at that point, can you claw back the money? Probably not. But what you could do is you could shut it off and say, until there is an audit, you're not getting any more federal funding, Washington. Then they would be screaming, and they'd probably hold a court case. Oh my gosh, you can't do this. Yes, you can. The federal government can shut off the money, and these are the instances, in my opinion, where it should be shut off. If you cannot properly provide paperwork that you should have been providing for years, you shouldn't be getting any money. Now, I want to get into the last bit of this, right? Now, this, I wouldn't call it fraud, but what I would call it is a setup, right? And this is within the church, to have you believe things that you shouldn't. And that's where you need to be a Berean, and you need to study your word to show yourself approved.
This apostolate continues only because faithful souls support it. If Mother Miriam Live has been a blessing to you, we ask you to donate at thestationofthecross.com. God bless you. We have an email from somebody who writes in anonymously from New Hampshire who says, I do not understand the recent embrace of Islam by the Vatican. How do we reconcile this with facts? Islam does not embrace the same God that we do. They do not believe Christ is God. They believe in conversion by the sword. Although we should love all, Our Lady appeared at Fatima not without intention, but to embrace Islam baffles my mind. Dear Anonymous, I think it baffles God's mind too. I think it's not at all of God. We do not embrace Islam. We embrace Islamists, Muslims, as Christ embraced us, to bring them to the truth. Not to pray with them, not to be united with them, because to be united with them is to unite ourselves with Satan. And so, no, it's very puzzling. I think this Pope has a sincere desire for so-called unity and to reconcile everybody. But unity apart from truth is not unity. It's leading everybody to hell, not to life. And so it's a great heartache. The same thing of his embracing and congratulating the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is a woman, which means she can't be a priest, no matter her position or title. And she supports abortion, and it's an abomination. And so it's one thing for true ecumenism to try to come together with those apart from Christ and respect them, to try to understand what they believe in order that you can come alongside them as Christ did us to bring them to God, but not to leave them in their sin and disbelief or errors. So it's not just a puzzlement, it's a heartbreak for us all to see the Pope doing that.
Yeah, it is a heartbreak. So let's go to God in prayer. God, thank you so much just for this week. Father, we're praying for cover going into our new beginning. Father, thank you so much just for life, just for breath. God, we know there's so many things going on in the world right now, and everything is so confusing. But right now, we want to just lay it at your feet and help us to have that peace that surpasses all understanding, God, and help us to increase our faith, God, and just to know that you will sort things out and that we have to maintain our trust in you, not man, but in you, God. Again, we thank you. We're praying for cover as we go on our travels, as we meet up with family. Father, thank you for everything, again, that you've given us, God. And it's in your Son, Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. So thank you guys again for joining me here on this Prayer with Friday.